What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and it is Tuesday, so that is time for another Top 10 video. As promised last week, we will be continuing on our magic items, kind of revised for all of the different D&D classes. This time, we have Top 10 magic items for the Barbarian class. So if you want to see the rules and specifics behind this, stay tuned. As promised, here are sort of the parameters, if you will, of this video. We will not be covering any consumable magic items. That means things like potions and scrolls, but it also means any other kind of magic item that you could have that has a non-renewable source of things like charges, right? Like a chime of opening is something that has so many charges, and when it's expended, it's gone. Or any of the sort of rods or things that can absorb so many levels of spells and then peter out. Those are not here as well. No legendary magic items of any kind, and I'm omitting things like the tomes and manuals that increase your ability scores because those are useful for everybody, and anybody can make use of them all the time, and realistically, if your character's long enough lived, you should just get all of them and just read them and continue to wait the 100 years and read them again. So there you go. Let's dive in to the top 10 barbarian magic items. Number 10. The Javelin of Lightning. This comes to us from the base rules / DMG. This is an uncommon non-attunement magic item. It's also one of the pieces that's nice enough to have a piece of art that you can see above my head here. And it's just a really good range. And honestly, it's just a really good item in general for basically anybody to have. You don't need to be particularly strength-based to make use of some of its abilities, but it is more beneficial if you can. It is a magic weapon. If you can transform it into a bolt of lightning, living out your Zeus fantasies, forming a line 5 feet wide and 120 feet long, shooting out a beam of lightning. Each creature in the line, excluding you and the target that you're targeting, must make a DC 13 dexterity saving throw or take 4d6 lightning damage. Reminder, you are picking a target 120 feet away and throwing it. That is the target, but because it is formed into a bolt of lightning, anything along that path to the target makes the dexterity saving throw or takes 4d6 lightning damage. It says the lightning bolt turns back into a javelin when it reaches the target. Make a ranged weapon attack against the target. Then the target, if they are hit, take the damage from the javelin, so the d6 plus your strength modifier plus any other bonuses you may have, plus an additional 4d6 lightning damage. It can't use this property again until the next dawn. In the meantime, though, it is still a magical weapon. So this gives you 120-foot range. It also bypasses the long range, short range of a javelin, right? Having a short range of 30, a long range of 120. This will hit at 120 just as well as it would at 5 feet. So this gets you the AoE damage of the line of lightning, of basically the half damage of a lightning bolt. And then if it hits the target, they are still taking the base damage of the javelin. Again, you being a barbarian are probably going to have a high strength, so that will be a benefit. You may hit on the target. It does 4d6 lightning damage in addition, and because this is an attack roll, it has the benefit of critting. You also have the benefit of being a barbarian. If you're at a higher level, brutal critical and things will come into play. So there's a lot of awesome ways to deal additional damage for a simple, uncommon magic item. Number 9. This is a toss-up between the animated shield or the bracers of defense. Fundamentally, in most situations, we're talking about the same thing. It's going to give you a +2 to your AC while also leaving your hands free to choose to wield a two-handed weapon if you so wish. The bracers of defense are a rare a rare magic item from the basic rules or the DMG. They give you a +2 bonus to your armor class, but you cannot wear armor or use a shield to gain access to them. You do have unarmored defense as a barbarian, so that's a possibility. But I want to stress this, and I feel like I can't stress this enough. You are not a lesser barbarian if you choose to wear armor of some kind, right? Sometimes, and I've seen this, I've been in games where I've played with a barbarian who just had a god-awful armor class because they were dead set on using just unarmored defense, when in reality, had they done something like add a breastplate or even half plate in there, their armor class would have jumped up almost 5 points and it would have been infinitely better for them. The animated shield, while this is also considered very rare, so it potentially, if your DM looks at rarity to skew where things fall, this may be something a little less accessible to you. It does also require a bonus action to activate, in which the shield leaps to life and orbits around you. The benefit of this is it is a shield, which you can use as a barbarian, so you could be wearing some sort of armor if you wanted to, and then use the animated shield to provide you with a +2 bonus to AC, while leaving your hands free to wield again a greatsword, or a maul, or a great axe, or what have you. It does have the downside of it only being in orbit for a minute before it either will come into your hand or drop to the ground. 9 times out of 10, your combat is going to last less than 10 rounds anyway, which would be a minute. So that may or may not come into play. The only thing is you would have to reactivate it had it fall to the ground. Otherwise, again, if you already have a very high AC, or very high dexterity, or high constitution, or both, then the bracers of defense are an easier sell, I feel like. But either way, it's just to get that AC up a little bit higher. Number 8. The Butcher's Bib, one that I'm sure many of you aren't aware of because this came out in Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. This rare attunement magic item is really just catered towards barbarians. You get this sick-looking black leather apron that is perpetually covered in blood, which is just a cool effect depending on the aesthetic you're going for, and it has some really good benefits basically for anybody who uses a slashing weapon, but I feel like it fits a barbarian's kind of power fantasy, right? So once per turn, when you roll damage for a melee attack with a weapon, you can re-roll the weapon's damage dice. If you do so, you must take the second total. So just consider when you roll the dice, right? If you're rolling, say, a greatsword and you roll double ones on your 2d6, then there's really no downside to rolling that damage dice again, because chances are you're going to roll better than 2 ones. This also kind of gives you a little bit of the, Savage Attacker feat, but without actually having to have it. And if that wasn't enough, your weapons that deal slashing damage score a critical hit on a 19 or 20. This is huge. Again, as a barbarian, again, it is limited to slashing weapons, so all of the fans like myself out there that love mauls and two-handed, blunt weapons, kind of sucks because you're limited, although I would love to make, I don't know what we would call the sort of bludgeoning weapon. It also doesn't work for piercing weapons as well. But I would love to make an equivalent for bludgeoning weapons and an equivalent for piercing weapons. So if you have ideas for that, leave them in the comments down below. But again, as you get to higher levels in Barbarian, you will get access to things like Brutal Critical, allowing you to get extra damage when you critically hit. You do have Reckless Attack from level 2, allowing you to further fish for crits with advantage on your attack rolls. And then again, you just increase your chances even further by making yourself crit on a 19 or a 20. This is a great way to get around that with having to do like a triple dip into, a 3-level dip into Champion Fighter to get that crit on a 19 or 20. This can be handled by a simple rare magic item. Number 7. The Ring of Free Action comes to us from the basic rules or the DMG. This attunement rare magic item is a ring, but it allows you to do what barbarians do best, and that's get in close and hit things, right? So while you're wearing this ring, difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement, which is huge because there are a lot of situations where someone could possibly use a magic spell. You could be fighting in a desert, in knee-deep water, or whatever, things that are considered difficult terrain. And while you do have that expanded movement of 40 feet, typically, and maybe a little bit more depending on your race and feats you've taken, eating that all up, just getting to your opponent sucks, and it will slow you down, literally. And this negates that. And if that wasn't enough, it also means that you can either be, magic can't reduce your speed, so even simple things like Ray of Frost hitting you can't reduce your speed, nor can you be paralyzed or restrained. The tricky part here is how this is handled. Because, depending on how you read it, it says, in addition, magic can neither reduce your speed nor cause you to be paralyzed or restrained. So the way I read that, and I think that's its intention, is you can't be magically paralyzed or restrained. So if something has like a tentacle and it grapples you, and while you're grappled, you are also restrained, that still works. But things like hold person, for example, you could just shrug them off because you can't be paralyzed by magic. Again, I don't know of too many things off the top of my head that restrain magically, but paralysis, again, is hold person's a second level spell. That can be absolutely devastating to a combat if a monster or enemy casts hold person on you as the barbarian. You are locked, you can't close the distance. I mean, that shutting down a heavy hitting melee character can just completely shift the tide of the battle, because while the enemy used to have to focus on the big scary thing right in front of them, hitting them with an axe or what have you, they now have you locked up and can choose to go focus on some of the more squishy characters, whereas the Ring of Free Action, I also think this could potentially be a magic item that is useful for just about any class, but specifically those that move around the combat and get in close. I think this is great on a monk, but again, I think having this on a barbarian, if you can get it into your build, is pretty useful also. Number 6. The Watchful Helm, one of the few good things to come out of Candlekeep Mysteries, in my opinion. It is a very rare magic item that requires attunement, but it does some pretty cool things. One, it gives you a +1 bonus to AC. And this, in that regard, reminds me a lot of like RPG video games where you get like the new helmet that gives you a bonus to your armor class. And I just like that. I would like to see more magical helmets in the game. Again, you can obviously homebrew this, but magical helmets that give you a +1 AC and some other benefit, which this definitely does. So +1 to your AC, and you remain of your surroundings, remain aware of your surroundings, even while asleep, which is just insane. So you can actually go to sleep and you still know what's going on around you, and you have advantage on wisdom perception checks that rely on sight. We could stop there, and that would be a fantastic magic item. +1 AC, don't have to worry about being sabotaged while you're sleeping or surprised. You're completely aware, and just a constant, and it's not advantage on your perception checks while sleeping. It's just a flat out advantage on your perception checks that rely on sight. I've said this before. If your DM is dealing with passive perception, and again, you're passively perceiving something using your sight, that is a +5 bonus, as constant sources of advantage on on any passive check provide a +5 to the passive check. And there's even more. As a bonus action, you can cast the See Invisibility spell from the helm. Once used, it can't be used again until the next dawn. I would also like to point out that See Invisibility, as you can see on screen, is typically a 1-action casting time. You can now do this as a bonus action. The only downside to this helm is that you cannot, well, actually, let me rephrase that. There may not be a downside that I was going to say. I was going to say that while raging, you can't cast spells. However, See Invisibility has a 1-hour non-concentration casting duration. So you can't concentrate on spells or cast spells while raging. However, you could use the bonus action to cast See Invisibility on your turn and then maintain that 1 hour worth of See Invisibility while you then enter a rage on the following turn. Pretty solid magic item. Number 5. The Absorbing Tattoo. This very rare magic item that requires attunement comes to us from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. In a similar fashion, at the base level, you could use some form of Armor of Resistance, which again, if you are utilizing armor on your barbarian, this would be a way to get a resistance to damage types. Now, again, this isn't necessarily for everybody. It's primarily limited here to elemental damage types. So if you happen to be a bear totem warrior barbarian, you will likely have resistance to all of these damage types inherently as part of your build. However, this is a way for someone to, one, potentially again keep that power fantasy of the unarmored barbarian, work in some cool sort of visuals and lore about their character with a magical tattoo that provides them damage resistance from one of the following 10 damage types: acid, cold, fire, force, lightning, necrotic, poison, psychic, radiant, or thunder damage. Again, you could choose, if your DM lets you choose, the DM may roll on the table or have you roll to choose what it is. But if you were, say, possibly to choose psychic and you were a bear totem barbarian, this would be another way for you to have resistance to all damage types while you are raging. On top of the, and I also should point out that this damage resistance is a constant on, it doesn't have anything to do with rage. but it also has an other activatable ability here called Damage Absorption. When you take damage of the chosen type, you can use your reaction to gain immunity to that instance of damage, and you regain a number of hit points equal to half the damage you would have taken. Once you use this reaction, you can't use it until until the next dawn. So again, if your DM lets you choose the damage type, I'd probably go for something like fire, cold, or lightning. If these are something you don't have resistance to already, as those are very common damage types, and the possibility of you getting hit with a fireball, being able to reactionarily take 0 damage, and then subsequently also heal from it, is pretty solid. Number 4. Not that I'm trying to turn you into Grog Strongjaw, but the Bloodaxe, the very rare attunement Great Axe that was brought to us from Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, is a great fit for any barbarian, assuming that you're interested in using Great Axe or that your DM will reskin it to possibly be a Blood Greatsword or what have you. Again, this was used famously by Grog in the first campaign of Critical Role, and it was originally brought to us in a version of this from the original Tal'Dorei campaign guide, but then was officially published in a WotC product in the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. So first of all, it is a +2 Great Axe, which is pretty good. Again, a very rare magic item equivalency would be a +3 Great Axe. This is a little bit less if we're looking at pure number game alone, but it does have much more benefits than a +3 Great Axe would have, just a +3 to attack and damage. This is a +2 to attack and damage. However, the axe also deals an additional d6 necrotic damage to creatures that aren't constructs or undead. If you reduce such a creature to 0 hit points with an attack using said axe, it gives you 10 temporary hit points. That's pretty awesome. I think that that's pretty great. I mean, even if you don't have that feature, that's kind of just icing on the cake. It's a +2 Great Axe that deals an extra d6 necrotic damage against most creature types. That's solid. And then again, throw in the fact that it can possibly give you a little bit extra resilience in your combat by the 10 temporary hit points. Also very cool. Number 3. The Eldritch Claw Tattoo. This also comes to us from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. This is an uncommon attunement magic item. But again, keeping with, once again, the concept, there's nothing saying you can't have multiple magical tattoos on your character. This has a couple of different benefits. One is a constant, always on, your unarmed strikes are now considered magical and have a +1 bonus to attack and damage. Again, that may not matter too much to your character, but if you find yourself in a situation where you have no weapons and you only have fisticuffs or your body to be said weapon, you can again use those to strike out to break through magical damage resistance that monsters may have. Again, if you take a feat or something to possibly get yourself access to increased damage on your unarmed strikes, then this may be actually a beneficial thing in that regard as well. But the main reason that I chose this is the Eldritch Maul feature, which is as a bonus action, you can empower the tattoo for 1 minute. For that 1 minute duration, each of your melee attacks, which is something I feel like people always focus on the unarmed strike part, but each of your melee attacks with a weapon or unarmed strike now have a reach of up to 15 feet. So you can now, as a barbarian with that Bloodaxe, let's say from the last one, you could have the Bloodaxe and now swing with the Bloodaxe with a reach of 15 feet, allowing you to keep yourself supreme distance from an enemy, allowing you to then swing and hit them with that extra range, which is pretty awesome. It also could possibly give you an option to hit flying creatures or creatures that were up on other levels that you would not normally be able to hit. And if that wasn't enough, those attacks deal an extra d6 force damage on a hit, and this is, again, can't be used until the next dawn. So potentially, if we just use some of the things that we talked about in this video, if you are using, say, the Bloodaxe in conjunction with the Eldritch Claw Tattoo, your +2 Great Axe would be that always deals an extra d6 necrotic damage, would potentially now have a 15-foot reach and deal an additional d6 force damage on a hit. So again, for those of you playing along at home, that is a Great Axe damage of a d12 +2 plus a d6 necrotic plus a d6 force. And again, that would be for a minute, but if you happen to kill anything in that time frame, it would give you temporary hit points. And then again, you still have the benefit to unarmed strikes. Perhaps you take the fighting style feat that gives you access, the improved unarmed strike damage. Or perhaps you're in a situation where the new Unearthed Arcana has come out and you're using those rules. I don't know. Either way, I just like the concept too of like the heavily tattooed barbarian, and then the tattoos are magically empowered. Number 2. The Crystal Blade. This is any sword. This rare attunement magic item comes to us from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. And in favor of, similar in some ways to the Bloodaxe, but significantly less on the rarity scale, this one does not provide you any benefits to attack and damage, numerical values, but you do whenever you hit a creature with an attack roll using this sword, which again could be a short sword, could be a great sword, deals an extra d8 radiant damage. Now, radiant damage is one of the least resisted damage types in the game, and this is also a d8, so potentially, again, if you're wielding a great sword, that's 2d6 plus a d8. However, it has more. The sword has 3 charges, and it regains a d3 charges daily at dawn. There is nothing that happens if you expend all of the charges, so there's no reason not to if you need to. And when you hit a creature with an attack roll using the sword, you can expend one of the 3 charges to regain a number of hit points equal to the extra radiant damage the sword dealt. Now, reminder, it is a d8 radiant damage, but again, using all the things we know as a barbarian, you have a lot of ways as a barbarian to fish for crits in the form of whether that be, something like Reckless Attack, something like the Butcher's Bib that we talked about earlier. You have that going, you're going for those crits, you're going to deal extra weapon damage, and then it happens if you were lucky enough to hit a crit, the d8 extra radiant damage from this weapon would go to 2d8, and you would heal equal to half that amount of damage, which is pretty cool, all things considered. And it also has another benefit, which to some may seem useless, but this could absolutely change the way a combat is. When you're holding the sword, you can use a bonus action to cause it to shed bright light in a 30-foot radius and dim light in another 30 feet beyond that, or cause it to shed dim light in a 10-foot radius or douse the light. So you can have a massive, almost a torch level, possibly even more than a torch in the 30-foot bright light, 30-foot dim light. Just have a small localized little dim light radius of 10 feet or douse the light completely. Again, to some that may seem like nothing, as a lot of folks do typically end up finding dark vision in one form or another. But if you happen to even have dark vision, but one of your allies doesn't, the fact that you could just activate this ability on your crystal sword, flood the area with light, and then allow your allies to attack without disadvantage or things of that nature. Again, this is a great option. It gives you extra damage. It gives you self-sustainability in a heal, again, 3 times per day. And you also have the ability to give the utility to the party by providing a source of light where otherwise they may not have had one. Number 1. I'm sure surprising no one, the Belt of Giant Strength is also on this list. This is a variety of different rarities, does require attunement, and is found in the base rules or the player's handbook, or I'm sorry, the base rules or the Dungeon Master's Guide. And again, there are a variety of rarities here. You can see we have 4 that fall within what we're covering in this video, rare, very rare items. And there are 2 legendaries. We obviously aren't going to touch on those, but from a simple rarity level, the Belt of Hill Giant Strength sets your strength score to a 21. And then again, as we go up, Frost, Stone, and Fire Giant sent it to either 23 or 25 for the Fire Giant, and those still fall within our realm of possibility. Now, originally, I didn't put these on my list because I'm not a huge fan of the belts, because I feel like that's one item that you're going to be permanently locked into for the entirety of your character. And if you're lucky enough to grind your strength up to 20, the nice benefit of being able to, if you magically get to level 20 Barbarian, is that +4 to your strength score, possibly putting it up at 24. But ultimately, if you were able to score a Belt of Fire Giant Strength, that's actually, in theory, 1 point better. So these are a great option. Again, I recognize that, 1, not everybody's going to be playing their character all the way till 20th level. That's actually very rare for that to even happen. And, depending on how you determine ability scores in your game, if you are able to get relatively easy access to or conversations with your DM to be on the lookout for a Belt of Giant Strength, then it may potentially allow you to re-alter and shift the way your build is, and possibly put, if you're using standard array, that's starting 15 in Dexterity or Constitution, and put maybe a 14 or a 13 in your strength, and then rely on the belt to bump it up the rest of the way, rather than having to spend basically every ability score improvement you have to building your strength up to 20. And then again, you know, the paladin comes along and gets a belt of frost giant strength, and you spend all this time devoting points into it, and they end up being stronger than you in the long run. So, like I said, it's not my favorite magic item, but I do recognize the utility and the strength that it has for a barbarian to gain access to one of these. I guess an honorable mention can go to the Gauntlets of Ogre Power, which sets your strength to a 19, I think, as a rare or possibly even uncommon magic item. Again, you want to be able to hit things reliably and hit them for a lot of damage, and these items are the ones that allow you to do that. So, there you go, folks. That is my top 10 magic items for the Barbarian in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Let me know, have you heard of all of these magic items that I've talked about, or some of these from the slightly newer or more nuanced books that you may not be aware of or did not pick up? Are you playing a Barbarian? Do you have any of these magic items on your Barbarian currently, or are you looking for any of them? Again, as the way this has been going, next week we're going to be dealing with the Bard. Bards can be a little bit tricky because they have access to so many different things over the course of just their character classes, but they have added a bunch of new magic items recently that are really awesome objects for the Bard to seek after, rather than just the musical instruments of the Bard that were found in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So I wanted to say thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for continuing to support me and the channel. And a huge thank you to all of you. Look, 98.3. We're closing in on that final little grind until we get to 100K. And I can't thank you all enough for all of the support you've given me over the years. So thank you all so much for watching. And I'll see you next time.